it every day. YouTube was launched in 2005. Prior to that, you might remember this, Greg, a regular guy from New Jersey, took a 2003 pop song, Numa Numa, and he videotaped himself singing it in his bedroom in New Jersey. Just as YouTube became public, he uploaded this to YouTube, and this video that he made turned into a global phenomenon. You might remember seeing some of the various things. He was on TV, etc. But something really interesting happened. 58,000 remixes were made of Greg doing the Numa Numa song. Wesh, you can see here, yes, here's some examples of people making their own versions of this Numa Numa song that Wesh made, that this guy Greg made. Wesh calls him the first guy on the global dance floor. You can see how much fun other people had making those videos. Wesh believed that the people who made those, either alone or individually, were part of a community. Another example of web-generated video content is 16-year-old DeAndre Cortez Way and his group Soulja Boy, who uploaded their Crank That video in April 2007. Again, there was a massive generation of remixes of what he did, including professors, prisoners, school kids. The one on the bottom right he calls the Harry Potter version. Lion King got into the mix, SpongeBob, these were uploaded to cell phones. So understand that this all started on YouTube in April 2007 as user-generated content. In August 2008, Soulja Boy was signed by a major label, and Crank That spent 7 weeks on top of the Billboard's Top 100, was now nominated for a Grammy. One more thing, there's something called vlogs, video blogging, where people upload a video about themselves to YouTube. There are about 10,000 videos every day addressed to the YouTube community. Okay, so let's look at some of the issues and observations around this. These various forms of social technology have resonated youth because they meet youth needs. Let's start with identity. Research suggests that anywhere from 1/4 to 1/2 of all instant messengers or those online pretend to be somebody else. In the virtual world, it's very easy in the norm to experiment with your identity and to pretend that you're somebody that you're not. From a developmental perspective, I wonder what the consequences are of hiding behind an avatar or an inauthentic identity. But think about how this type of identity experimentation is helpful to youth. Related to identity development through social technology is the ever-present focus on the self as the center of one's universe. It's clear that youth have a huge need for autobiography in various forms. Although youth have always been self-absorbed, it appears that these social technologies have promoted and facilitated this type of behavior to a new level. There's an ever-present mechanism to let people in the world, or your very closest friends, know what you think, what you're doing 24/7. Taking one's own photograph has become a type of folk art. Teens continually snap their own photos, manipulate them, upload them to their favorite social network sites. Noah, for example, took his own photo every day for 6 years, posted it onto MySpace, and then made a YouTube videotape of him changing over time. Yesterday, Mr. Scott Haldane, the president and general manager of Greater Toronto's YMCA, described the need of youth to form a social connection, to be together, and he gave some excellent examples of what he's doing and his why. But it also appears that in the virtual world, many islands are very welcoming and try to facilitate social connection and belonging. The propaganda is that it's easy to meet friends and to figure out how to belong and do things that you want to do. Okay, let's return to the identity for a minute, but add social competence involved in this. In some of the very few studies that have been done, shy or lonely kids report being able to more easily make new friends and benefit from being able to experiment with their identities. It allows connections to be made among youth who may not be able to connect to others in any other way. Consider that the average Chinese young person has 37 online friends they've never met. One of the reasons for these friendships is that youth report that it's easier to talk to others online about sensitive and intimate topics. Over half reported they could get to know somebody better online than in face-to-face contact. Many of these technologically structured communities represent liminal or marginal spaces and places. Literally, one is between two worlds or two sensory experiences or on a type of threshold. These liminal places offer more freedom, less clear-cut social norms, and less concern for person's status or personal characteristics. It seems to me that these technological structure places challenge us to think about what it means to be an individual or part of a community. The public and private or individual and community are in some ways merged. Wesch, in his video to the Library of Congress, observes that we are moving from place-to-place connectivity to person-to-person connectivity, which is not dependent on time or space. He uses Barry Wellman's phrase, networked individualism, to describe how people are connected via social technology. This is clearly what happened in the silent raves. People were their own DJs, but yet some way felt connected to others in their own individualism. In this way, personal autonomy and choice is supported. There is some literature that suggests that social technology has created post-subcultures which are not tied to a place, but are global and placeless and transient and temporary. In these liminal post-subcultures, youth control their own universe or metaverse, and they are their own private DJs and bloggers. In this liminal space, the public and private are blurred. In essence, one private space becomes a portal to the public, and in public, one can cocoon into a private realm of music or individual communication. I'm still intrigued when I watch college students walk across campus, and they're totally unaware of their surroundings, chatting on their cell phones, and it doesn't matter to them if their private conversations are publicly heard. Another example is that on YouTube, millions of people dance in front of a webcam in their own rooms or vlog about their daily lives. What do they see? A webcam or a computer screen, that's what they're looking into. They don't see the person or persons with whom they might connect. They probably don't even know who they're connecting with or in what context the others will view them. This blurring of space, again, liminal space, is redefining the way youth and others connect. I think there's solid evidence that community can be built through webcams and virtual worlds, but time will tell how long-lasting it is. There are many downsides, though. Quickly, one is that the anonymity of social technology also spawns hatred and violence and intolerance. I can't get into that now, but there is great need to examine that aspect of what is happening to youth. I worry that it is too easy to be mean, to bully, to invoke all the isms that you can think of behind avatars and hidden identities. My eyes have really been opened as I've delved into this topic, and I'm not sure what to think. The opportunities and the implications are both exciting and scary. The only thing I know is that next month, things will probably change. I think the leisure community needs to better understand what's going on out there with our young people and conduct rigorous studies. I worry about the self-absorption and the self-promotion of youth and lack of meaningful two-way communication. But perhaps I shouldn't worry, because there are no doubt deep relationships and meaningful conversations to be had using social technology, particularly among those youth who are bound geographically or culturally, or those who are shy and lonely, or those who are in some way different from the norm. I do question whether the virtual world or other forms of social technology can replace live human contact, person to person, eye to eye, touch to touch. Is problem solving in a group equally effective in the virtual world as in the non-virtual world? Can someone feel the same thrill of competition in both worlds? Certainly one doesn't get the same level of physical activity. Can the virtual world help kids learn tolerance and respect for each other? Can it replace the feeling of actually being in nature and the smell of the woods or the salt air at the ocean? I hope some of you have been intrigued enough, like I was, and to start to answer some of these intriguing questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Caswell, for your very interesting speech. Le cyberespace, donc, lieu de pratique dans le domaine du loisir, lieu de relation aussi, avec tous les risques et toutes les limites que ça peut représenter. Il nous reste 10 minutes. Nous avons la chance, donc, d'avoir encore 10 minutes pour pouvoir recevoir vos commentaires, vos questions. Je vous demanderai, s'il vous plaît, d'être bref et dans vos questions et dans vos commentaires, de façon à permettre au maximum de personnes de s'exprimer. Vous avez des micros en avant et à l'arrière. Alors, je prendrai aussi, s'il y a des questions, 2, 3 ou 4 questions en même temps pour permettre à la fin à nos panélistes d'y répondre d'un bloc, de façon à permettre le plus d'expression possible. Alors, est-ce que quelques courageux dans la salle? Je pense que beaucoup de questions ont été soulevées à divers niveaux de l'espace privé et de l'espace public. Alors, il ne faudrait pas se gêner. Ah, une première courageuse. Ici en avant. Oui.
Moi, je vais poser la question en français, mais...
Peut-être vous nommer aussi.
OK. Moi, mon nom, c'est Andréane. Moi, ça m'inquiète beaucoup, les communications pour les jeunes. On parlait beaucoup d'MSN, Facebook, tout ça. Est-ce qu'on compense à quelque part? Est-ce qu'on va, je sais pas, moi, faire plus de présentations orales, par exemple, dans les écoles pour compenser à quelque part? Est-ce que les parents vont priver un peu leurs jeunes un nombre d'heures particulier par jour, par exemple, pour aller sur Internet? Je sais pas, c'est quelque chose qui me dérange.
OK. Je prends note, donc, des implications de ça en termes de communication, en termes d'heures, en termes d'évolution vers des communications orales plutôt qu'écrites. Alors, c'est une première intervention. Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres commentaires? D'autres questions? Oui, monsieur.
I have a question for the last speaker, Professor Caldwell. Over the last couple of days, I've engaged in conversations with, I'm a volunteer person, so I'm not a practitioner, but in talking to other practitioners, the change that's occurred in one generation where kids have gone from unsupervised, unstructured play and being able to develop their own personality freely to now a world where so much is structured and kids are being driven everywhere and supervised and parents are around all the time, and even if they're playing a passive role, there isn't those opportunities for the youth to develop their own personality outside of those parameters. Do you see a connection in the rise of, besides the technical side of it, the rise of this desire for a safe or free space to be able to develop their personality, and how we've changed our style of child rearing, especially when it comes to activities?
Je prends note du commentaire, puis after you will answer. OK? Thank you. Oui?
Oui, bonjour, Francine Bellil. Je suis mairesse de la municipalité de Lac-Saguenay, présidente de Loisirs Laurentides. Alors, j'ai assisté hier après-midi à votre atelier concernant l'FQM et l'URLS. C'était très intéressant. Moi, malheureusement, on n'a pas eu le temps de tout poser les questions qui nous préoccupaient. Moi, je voudrais vous poser une question aux représentants de l'FQM, surtout. Concernant les subventions, est-ce que vous avez l'intention de regarder auprès du MELS pour que les unités régionales aient des subventions ou des sommes d'argent pour être capables de travailler pour avoir des personnes ressources pour aider les petites municipalités dévitalisées? Parce que vous parlez de municipalités dévitalisées, mais il y a des municipalités qui, encore une fois, ont passé sous la barre. Puis je pense que ces municipalités-là sont peut-être plus dévitalisées que ceux qui vont recevoir les subventions. Alors, je me questionne si l'FQM a l'intention de regarder pour aller chercher des subventions pour que les unités régionales puissent aider les petites municipalités à se regrouper pour avoir des personnes ressources pour les aider à développer leurs loisirs. Je vous remercie beaucoup.
Merci. Alors, je vais demander d'abord à Mrs. Caldwell if you want to answer for Mr. No? Yes? You can take the microphone.
I'm having technological difficulties here.
Yes.
So my understanding, I'm to answer the question, the one on structured versus unstructured. I think, I'm sorry, I'm very much concerned personally about the amount of structure that many, many kids, especially in North America and Europe, have. And I do believe, and I don't know the reason for all of the experimentation online. I do wonder if youth do use that form of of communication so that it offers them another way to experiment with their identities and develop into new personalities as opposed to being overly controlled by parents. We do know that over-control by parents or adults is a very negative thing for youth because they do need to experiment. And so I don't know, I'm sure that doesn't exactly answer your question, but I'll
OK,
pass
thank
it.
you. Monsieur Fortin?
Oui, nous sommes très préoccupés par la situation actuelle du loisir en milieu rural québécois et l'ensemble du milieu rural. Effectivement, j'ai fait un clin d'œil sur les municipalités dévitalisées, mais c'est pour l'ensemble de ces municipalités. Des endroits, l'offre de loisirs n'est carrément pas adéquate et même dans certains cas est totalement absente. Pour nous, la démarche qu'on parlait de peut-être de mettre en place une table nationale avec nos associations, avec le réseau unité régionale des loisirs, également l'Association québécoise du loisir municipal, et je vous dirais pour toutes les municipalités rurales ou carrément tous les membres de la Fédération québécoise des municipalités, sans exclure quoi que ce soit.
Bien, merci. Monsieur, ici en avant.
Alors oui, bonjour. Mon nom est Roger Quentin de Québec, ici. C'est un commentaire de la part d'un parent, d'un adolescent qui a vécu une expérience de loisir intéressante. Il a été engagé comme moniteur de pétro cet été. Mon jeune de 15 ans aura accès à toute la technologie et l'utilise amplement, des technologies de communication, ainsi de suite. Je fais un lien avec son expérience d'animateur de pétro cet été parce que moi, j'ai confiance encore à la force du lien social qu'il a vécu et qui lui donne le goût de revivre l'expérience cet été. Alors, je demeure optimiste avec le lien social que nous permet les expériences de loisirs. Merci.
Merci de votre commentaire. Alors, je prendrai une dernière question.
Oui, bonjour. Luce Proulx. Ma question est pour le représentant de la Fédération des Québécoises des municipalités. Vous avez mentionné dans votre exposé que les communautés rurales qui ont renforcé, en tout cas, peut-être pas dans ces termes-là que vous l'avez mentionné, là, mais qui ont renforcé leur vitalité, ont choisi le rôle des citoyens comme maîtres de solutions. Est-ce que ça veut dire qu'on voit apparaître des nouvelles formes de gestion des loisirs, autres que le modèle traditionnel, qui sont souvent pris en charge par la municipalité? Parce qu'entre autres, là, ce n'est pas toutes les municipalités qui ont des loisirs en ce moment. Et moi, je suis curieuse de savoir s'il y a d'autres façons là, de gérer les loisirs.
Monsieur Fortin? Luce, peux-tu reposer plus précisément la question?
Ma question? Je suis curieuse de savoir s'il y a d'autres formes de gestion des loisirs dans les municipalités rurales. Par exemple, est-ce qu'on voit apparaître soit des OBNL de loisirs, soit des coopératives de solidarité en loisirs qui sont gérées davantage par les citoyens que par la municipalité, parce que la municipalité n'a pas toujours les ressources nécessaires pour gérer, pour offrir une vaste gamme de loisirs à ses citoyens.
Ben, un peu mes propos, lorsque je mentionne, les citoyens devraient être les maîtres d'œuvre. Souvent, on peut retrouver certains équipements de loisirs dans nos municipalités et sont un peu comme inertes. On en connaît des arénas ou carrément des patinoires avec des salles communautaires, mais il ne se passe rien. Ce qu'on dit, c'est qu'il faut que les citoyens se prennent en main un peu ce qui existait aussi il y a quelques années, où c'était les gens les bénévoles qui organisaient un ensemble d'activités de loisirs et il faut que les élus suivent, arrêter le rythme. Je pense que ça peut prendre toutes sortes de formes. Quand j'ai mentionné que c'est fini le mur à mur, c'est-à-dire que ce sont les gens qui se prennent en main et à partir des besoins, des particularités des municipalités, il faut que les élus regardent ces particularités-là. Également, le gouvernement, l'État accepte ces particularités-là de nos milieux pour justement revitaliser, mobiliser, etc. Et ça peut prendre toutes sortes de formes dans une localité, à mon point de vue.
Alors, il est 11 heures. Je remercie une autre fois nos panélistes pour leur excellente contribution. c'est le temps de la pause café et à 11h30, il y a une période d'1 heure d'atelier. Alors, nous vous invitons à consulter votre programme. La pause café a lieu au même endroit que d'habitude. Merci beaucoup.